What if I told you that the sweetest success stories often begin with bitter disappointment? That's the story of Daniel Reyes, a third-generation farmer who turned a devastating failure into the opportunity of a lifetime, all because of watermelon. Daniel said, "People only see the fruit when they look at these watermelons, but I can see my father's hands teaching me how to feel a ripe watermelon. I can see my grandfather's wisdom in every seed. And most importantly, I can see the year that almost broke me, but instead brought me to where I am today." 5 years ago, Daniel inherited the family farm after his father died. For generations, the Reyes family had grown traditional crops: corn, wheat, and soybeans. The farm had always provided a modest living, but rising costs and falling commodity prices were making it more difficult every year. Daniel said, "I remember sitting at this table with my dad when I was a kid. He would say, 'Danny, farming is not just a job, it's a commitment to the land, to your family, and to yourself.' When he died, I wasn't just the heir to the land, I was the heir to that promise. But keeping that promise was proving more difficult than Daniel could have ever imagined. In the spring of his first year running the farm alone, unprecedented flooding destroyed nearly 80% of Daniel's crops before they could mature. Daniel says, "I lost almost everything. The insurance didn't cover the cost of the bank loan. I remember standing in the muddy field thinking, this is it. This is where the Reyes farming legacy ends, with me." Daniel's neighbor said, "We were all worried about Daniel. His farm had been in our family for generations. To see everything washed away like this was heartbreaking." With limited resources and a desperate need to salvage something from the growing season, Daniel made a decision that seemed crazy to everyone around him. Daniel said, "I had a little piece of upland land that didn't flood, just 2 acres. And I remember my grandfather once telling me that watermelons like sandy, well-drained soil. Everyone thought I was crazy. Watermelons? Here? Nobody grows watermelons commercially in this county." With no money to help, Daniel worked from sunrise to sunset, planting and tending his watermelon garden. He had exhausted his savings, maxed out his credit cards, and lived on hope. Daniel said, "Those watermelons became my life. I would talk to them every morning. Sounds crazy, I know. But when you have nothing left, like a piece of fruit, you pour it all out." That summer was one of the hottest on record. While devastating for other crops, it was perfect for watermelons. But Daniel faced new challenges. Learning to grow a crop with which he had little experience, battling raccoons and deer, and wondering how he would sell his crop even if it was successful. Daniel's wife said, "There were nights when I would find him asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by books on watermelon farming. He was determined to make it work, not just for himself, but for us, for the promise." As his watermelons grew, Daniel realized that simply growing watermelons wasn't enough. He needed to find a way to make his watermelons special. Daniel said, "I started experimenting with the organic farming methods my grandfather used. No chemicals, natural pest control, playing tunes to the plants, the old country songs my father loved. The townspeople started calling me the Watermelon Whisperer. They meant it as a joke, but I took it as a badge of respect." But the real touch of Daniel's talent came when he began researching watermelon varieties that were not typically grown commercially. Daniel said, "I got these heirloom seeds, yellow crimson, moon and stars, and this incredible Japanese variety called the sweet white-fleshed cream of Saskatchewan. No one around has ever seen anything like it." When harvest time came, Daniel's small plot of land produced the most extraordinary watermelons the county had ever seen. Bright yellow, speckled green, and round to oblong. Daniel said, "That first harvest, I'll never forget cutting that first yellow crimson watermelon. The color was an incredible golden and sweet. I actually cried right there in the field because I knew we had something special. But finding the perfect watermelon was half the battle. Daniel still needed to sell them." Daniel said, "I loaded up my truck with as many things as I could and drove to the farmer's market in town. I was so nervous. What if no one wanted them? What if they thought they were too weird?" The reaction was more than Daniel could have imagined. Daniel said, "By noon I was all sold out. People were asking if I took pre-orders. A chef at a farm-to-table restaurant asked if I could supply him regularly. It was overwhelming." Word spread about the miracle melons from Reyes Farm. The next year, Daniel expanded to 10 acres. The next year, to 30 acres. He began hiring local workers, many of whom had lost their own farms due to economic hardship. One of his farm workers said, "I was leaving the city to look for factory work in the city. Then Daniel hired me. Now I'm the field manager, supervising 20 seasonal workers." These watermelons didn't just save his farm, they saved our community. Daniel said, "We started doing farm tours, watermelon tastings. Kids would come to learn about farming. We created a harvest festival where visitors now come from 3 states. 5 years after that devastating flood, Reyes Farm has become the region's largest producer of heirloom watermelons. But for Daniel, the sweetest success isn't measured by profits. Daniel said, "Last spring, we bought back the eastern lands that my grandfather had to sell during the drought of '78. We are now farming more land than any of the Reyes generations before us. But the real miracle? My son is getting interested in farming again. Before growing watermelons, he saw farming as a dead end. Now he is studying agricultural science, inventing new farming techniques. The commitment continues." Daniel says, "People ask me what the secret is, how we turn things around. And I tell them it's not about the watermelon. It's about finding your own way, even when the traditional ways no longer work." Daniel said, "Sometimes the greatest blessings come in the guise of disaster. That flood forced me to try something new, to risk everything on a crazy idea. And that's a lesson that's more valuable than any harvest." Daniel Reyes reminds us that resilience isn't just about surviving the storm. It's about finding the courage to plant something new after the waters recede. His watermelons didn't just save a farm, they became a symbol of how innovation, determination, and a willingness to embrace change can turn disaster into opportunity. Remember, the sweetest fruits often grow from the most challenging seasons. If you were inspired by Daniel's story, then hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification, because we upload videos like this regularly.